Our final speaker has an extraordinary CV, Royal Marine, council leader, Sky Bridge protester, government minister, and now the SNP deputy leader. Conference, please welcome Keith Brown.
Thanks very much, John. Thanks very much, Conference. And just as John said previously that Laura would do her bit to reduce Scottish Tory numbers in Scotland, I fully expect that John Nicholson will do his bit to fully reduce numbers in Scotland too. As you've heard already, Conference, it's very clear from the speakers we've heard that Scotland is on a journey that's lasted many, many years, many decades. But it is now getting to the most exciting stage ever. It's clear that independence is not only on the horizon, but looming into view. It's clear also that with the poll this weekend that we've seen, with support for independence at 50% and support for Scotland taking Scotland's future into its own hand, that support is growing further. Now, friends, I remember the referendum on the night in 2014. I was at the count in Clackmannanshire Council in my constituency. Just as we were the first to announce in 1997 when Scotland voted to reinstate its parliament, in that event in 2014 the vote was 54% no, 46% yes. Now on that night there were many tears. My oldest son had fought in his first ever campaign, immediately burst into tears on hearing the result, as did many others. And then we had to watch the Labour and Tory parties jubilant, hugging each other, absolutely delighted with the outcome. They looked very much better together. As you know, in my constituency there are two parts to it, Clackmannanshire and Dunblane. Now in Clackmannanshire, two parts in particular, Dollar and Muckart, were the strongest no-voting parts of that council area. But during the recent European elections, we saw some incredible changes taking place of people that had previously been supporting the no side, who felt appalled by the way that Brexit was being carried out, who felt disgusted that their children very often were going to be denied the opportunities that membership of the European Union brings. And we saw a real shift. People that had never considered voting for the SNP or independence before now moving across. And that, I think, is the absolutely key thing we have to be aware of. That we are on the cusp of moving people that have previously voted no to come across to yes. Now, there is no way to an independent Scotland without convincing people that previously voted no to voting yes. But it struck me that with that change that we've seen, not just in Dollar and Muckart in the Clackmannanshire part of my constituency, but also in Dunblane, with that change taking place and with the poll ratings, what I'm looking forward to is for the next referendum when Clackmannanshire stands and declares that Scotland has once again won her independence. Now, we know that a majority of the Scottish Parliament supports independence, and there's been much discussion about Section 30 orders and Plan Bs and so on. Just to be absolutely clear, we are not seeking permission for a referendum. We are seeking agreement for a referendum. And the reason that we're doing that is not to please London, Westminster, however you want to term it. It's because we want to have a fair, clear choice for the people of Scotland, and one that's respected in Scotland by both sides, one that's respected in London, and one that's respected internationally. That's why we have to have the gold standard of a very clear referendum. But I have to say, we also have to be absolutely clear that Scotland will not accept a Westminster veto on Scotland's right to choose. In recent weeks, friends, we've seen hundreds of thousands of people taking to the streets, making clear that Scotland's voice will be heard. And while Westminster politics is well and truly broken, more and more people are convinced that Scotland should take the opportunity to become an independent country. We have the mandate, we have the momentum, and we can win that majority for independence. And the party membership, as we can see from this week's conference, is motivated and raring to go. And it's that energy and enthusiasm that I can feel in the air at this conference, and this drive which I think we all feel to seek a better future for our nation, which means, and I am certain of this, and you can actually tangibly feel it now, that Scotland will soon take its place as an independent country. And our people in this movement and our people in Scotland are our greatest asset. And we shouldn't be under any doubt that the job of taking the nation on that journey lies with us and with our friends in the Yes movement, and that we have the passion and the drive to see it through. And friends, the task of ensuring that we allow people the opportunity to make that choice has never been more important. We are living in times when the vision of Scotland as a successful, independent country offers people hope. I talked about the people in Dollar and Muckert, absolutely scunnered with Brexit and what it means for Scotland. Absolutely scunnered that in many cases, having voted no and told that the only way to secure Scotland's place in the EU was to vote no, they are now being forced to being dragged out of the EU against their will. And they see the UK government and the Westminster parties as having brought only despair. And set in the context of the uncertainty and the unrest of a dysfunctional Brexit government at Westminster, now more than ever, it's essential that we provide the opportunity and we provide the arguments and the reassurance that Scotland can choose a better, fairer and more prosperous future, a future where we make our own choices and determine our own path. Now, you may have heard some arguments about the financial situation yesterday. It's worth noting that the recent report by the Institute for Fiscal Studies said the UK is now £1.8 trillion in debt. That's around double the debt that the Tories inherited back in 2010. They also said that borrowing would have to rise by £100 billion, that we had already spent in the UK £66 billion because of the Brexit vote. Now, you will have heard from Derek Mackay yesterday, and it's especially underlined by the fact that our pensioners are being told they might have to wait until they're 75 to get one of the worst pensions in Europe. The simple truth is clear. Scotland cannot afford to stay part of this union. So, legislation published by the Scottish Government is paving the way for that new referendum on Scottish independence by setting out the rules for any future referendum held by the Scottish Parliament, such as who is eligible to vote and how campaigns will be regulated. And I fervently hope that the topical resolution passed previously, or rather the arguments for that topical resolution, that we do not have the voter suppression initiatives being offered by the UK Government. We want to have the maximum possible turnout and eligibility to vote. But this move to have the referendum regulation set down is a very important step by the Scottish Government, laying the groundwork and paving the way to a referendum in this parliamentary term, and that is legal and constitutional. So it's our responsibility within the party to be ready for that, and the party is in great shape. We should have a spring in our step. We've just had our best ever European election result. Opinion polls showing growing leads for the SNP both at Holyrood and at Westminster. And friends, this is a very good position to be in. And we should be buoyed by that prospect, not least the fact that we're in that position after 12 years, not just of being in government, but being in government during a time of austerity under the UK government. That's a fantastic achievement in its own right. But having said all that, we can take nothing for granted. There is work to do, and we have a great challenge ahead of us. It's here that the hard work begins, and it's not easy to say that to the face of Margaret Ferrier, let's be honest. But however hard we've worked up to this point, this is where it gets really tough. With you in all of your branches, we need to get out there, we need to be chapping doors, we need to make the case and build support for the cause. And I think almost everybody in this conference will have stories of people we know that voted no in 2014, who would, given the opportunity, vote yes now. And it's people like that that we have to reach. People out there who are currently making a journey in their political opinions and reassessing the nation's future prospects. and they are growing in number. When faced with the current appalling government at Westminster and its race towards the Brexit cliff edge, they're looking for something different, something better, and they're looking for a choice. They're looking for a way to escape Boris's broken Britain, and they're ready to hear the case for independence, and it's our job to listen, and listen is the most important thing we can do. I was elected in the by-election in 1996. I won it by 4 votes. Now, we had many people opposed both to me and the SNP, and over the 20-plus years since that time, even my political opponents, when they've required help or wanted to discuss something, have found that I've been willing to listen. Now, at the last election, I had a majority of nearly 7,000. Listening to people is really important. And don't think that you have to win the argument there and then on the doorstep. People think about what you said after you've left. And if you've been shown a willingness to listen, to respect their point of views, where they have concerns, to listen to and try and address those concerns, that makes an impression on people, especially, as is often the case, we are the only party to have turned up on their door. It's really important to listen and listen respectfully. And think about the nature of the people that we have to convince. It's not those of us that are already convinced. We know in many cases we can put that argument to them very effectively. We know we have their support. We have to convince others who have been more reluctant to come across. And the reason we have to do that is because we don't win independence without these. So if you think very carefully about the approach that we take, then I'm sure we can get further support for independence. We have to provide the reasons and the context for people to make that choice. We have to persuade them with patience and understanding and with open arms. There's no point in saying you got it wrong in 2014, you were wrong about this, you were wrong about this. We have to make sure they find it as easy as possible to come on board with our arguments. And to do that, we have to get out there and speak to our friends, our neighbours, our colleagues and our families and build the case in that reasonable and consensual manner. This conference is a key to building further support for independence. The march in Edinburgh just weeks ago demonstrates the enormous groundswell of support for our movement. And with people stretching as far as the eye could see, it was some sight to behold. And can I say, we should never be too proud to march. I have to say I've done a few marches in my time, and some of them have been easier than other ones. It's much easier without a pack on your back, for example. But the marches that we've had in the last year or so are absolutely joyous occasions. There's never been any trouble at them. There are people that want to come and take part, and so they should. Even people that are still a little bit uncertain come along to those marches to see what it's about and then become convinced by the arguments they hear at the marches. And there is nothing more effective conference than talking to people and taking them on that journey from no to yes. We also, of course, look forward to a Westminster election campaign, and it's clear that the work has to start now where it's not started already. And front and centre of that campaign will be to offer the Scottish people an alternative to the current chaos at Westminster and the looming disaster, the potential looming disaster of a no-deal Brexit, to offer people a choice for something different. And as we leave later on today, after having heard our leader, Nicola Sturgeon, and we return to our branches and get on with the job of campaigning for the coming election, we should take with us that great sense of optimism and understand the fact that every election that we have to stand in is one where we try and convince people about independence and not just to make sure we get a vote at that election. So we have to be the people that show that optimism for what Scotland can be. And we have to show the optimism for the campaign ahead of us for the future of Scotland and to look forward to joining that European family of nations as an equal and independent partner. And to be a nation that, once we get there, looks to, encourages, helps and defends other nations like Catalonia to help join us in that family of nations. So it's been 35 years for me, and it's been many years for many people here, but I'm just as excited as ever to go out and make that case for our country's future, giving voters in Scotland the chance to shape that better future for Scotland. This is the chance that we have. We are closer now than we've ever been. It's been my view that since before the last referendum in 2014, we have been in the process of becoming independent. It's there within our grasp. I think many people, especially those that have been on this path for a long time, sense it, they can feel it, they can touch it. This is our time, conference. Let's grab the opportunity with both hands. Thank you.